Ah, there's the lady, she says, reporting in progress. Very good. Ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome to the ladies' Shiur. I just said ladies and gentlemen, because there could be, you never know, online, on Zoom. Mr. Kimod might be there, that's right. Is Ellie in the background there? That's right.
No, he's right behind the wall there in another room.
Behind the wall, all right. Behind the wall, like Mashiach is behind the wall. Okay, so we are on page in the Chumash, in the Gutnick Chumash is page 344, 345. A new book, a brand new book. And immediately I want to share, of course, that everybody knows that this book is, what is the book called in English? It is the book of Exodus. Indeed. But what is the real theme of the book as far as the Jewish people are concerned? Of course, the Exodus, but there's, in a sense, there's two parts of the Exodus, right? As Hashem said to Moshe Rabbeinu during the burning bush experience, that the idea is that they will come out of Egypt, and what will happen? What will happen then when they come out of Egypt?
They'll become a people.
Al Har Hazeh, that the people will serve Hashem on this mountain. Of course, so I'm referring to the giving of the Torah. So the giving of the Torah really is the central part of the book of Shemos, and the Exodus, of course, leads up to that. And it's just a very interesting thing. It's not something you really notice, but there's this great insight I heard from Jonathan Sachs on this, Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, Alav Shalom. I'm sure he won't mind if I don't say Lord or Professor or whatever, because he's in the Olam Emes for that sort of stuff. He was very humble. So he said a very interesting thing. He said, if you look at the book of Bereshis, Bereshis is a book of really, right from the word go, is a book of conflict, of sibling rivalry, of sibling hatred. Brothers can't get along. Brothers kill each other. Brothers are jealous of each other. Brothers angry with each other. Right? It goes all the way through, doesn't it? From Cain and Abel, and even the sons of Noah, they had problems, right? Well, and you have, then you had Avram with Yishmael and Yitzchak, and then Esau and Yaakov and the brother. He just doesn't stop. He goes on. A whole book we've got full of sibling rivalry, and actually sometimes it leads to death, which of course happened right at the beginning. Cain and Abel, and Cain and Hevel. So what happened at the end of Bereshis was a fantastic, wonderful thing, that even though this family had been divided for so long, yes, finally they all came together. Ayechi, Yaakov, yes, Be'eretz Mitzrayim, and they all lived together in peace and harmony. Yosef forgave his brothers completely. He never really, we don't actually find anywhere that he harbored any grudge. So he forgave them, and there was a resolution, a real proper conflict resolution, right? The brothers actually, if you remember, we spoke last week, were very nervous. They were very, very, perhaps, rightly so. They were a bit paranoid, shall we say, about Yosef's intentions. Yes? You know what they said about there was somebody that they have a hotline. You heard about the chap who called up paranoia hotline. So the chap on the other said, "Where did you get this number?" So they were paranoid because they thought he's really going to get them back now that the father's gone. We discussed that, right? But he had absolutely no bad intentions, and this was the wonderful resolution of it. And that ability of Yosef to forgive, which also by the way speak about Tanya yesterday, about the importance of the day before, the importance of forgiving people, forgiving them, and crucially important, because everything has been a shamayim, meant that the family is now cohesive, and that was really the build up to the giving of the Torah. You see, because the Torah can only be given when there's proper unity amongst the Jewish people. And in fact, as we'll see in a few weeks' time, in Parsha's Yisro, that the Vayichan Sham Neged Ahad, yes, the whole people camped Ki'ish Echad b'lev echad. So the prelude to this, the going into exile and the coming out and the giving of the Torah was dafka achieved at the end of Bereshis Vayechi. That was the true life in a sense of what Yaakov always hoped for, this wonderful unity amongst all his children, which had always eluded him. And it had eluded the others, and it had eluded everyone till then. It finally came to fruition in Vayechi, and then started the whole meat and potatoes, shall we like, of the Exodus, followed by the redemption. So now, the first thing we start off with, of course, the Eila Shemos b'nei Yisrael. Eila Shemos b'nei Yisrael. Now, everybody will, the keen eye amongst you will say, well, we already know who was there in Mitzrayim. We all know, we learned from the previous chapter, everybody came down. There's nobody left. They didn't leave anybody behind, Sometimes, you leave this suitcase behind, and sometimes on holiday, we left one of the kids behind. No. Nobody was left behind, and everybody knows who came down to Mitzrayim. So here we repeat it again. Rashi, of course, picks up this point and says, we've already enumerated them. But so even when they passed away, they enumerated, right? Because they are beloved so much. This is what, like Hashem says, like the stars. There's two aspects here. There's the idea of preciousness, which is the idea of Bamidbar, right? The idea of the preciousness of the Jews. Hashem's always counting us, right? Counting out the money. Like the other king was in his castle, counting out the money. Here Rashi brings another metaphor of stars. And, because you see, the Jewish people have two parts to them. There's the number part, that's how many we are. And how many came down to Egypt? How many people? 70. 70. Now, when you have a number, you're just a number. You don't have any individuality. You're just one of a group. But you see, Judaism has that idea because there's a common denominator of every single Jew. What's the common denominator? Is his pintaliyid, is his special role. Every Jew has that. Then you have the names. Every name is unique and special. So we have both parts to us, okay? And that's an interesting thing compared to the sun and the stars. Now it's interesting. You read this over, that Hashem brings them out, and he takes them out and brings them back with a number and with names. So in other words, the whole universe is rotating, according to us, it's rotating around us, yes? So we see the stars come in, they come up, and they go down. And so you read this and you say, okay, they all got names. Well, what does that mean? They all got names. Can you, well, how many, first of all, let's ask the question. And you probably won't know the answer, but you'll give a guess. How many stars are there in the universe? It's actually not infinite.
You can't really count them.
All right, well, I'll tell you what. In the observable, to the observable eye, yes. In other words, you go out and look at a good night at the Milky Way, and you're in the country with no pollution, and it's a nice, clear summer's day after it's rained. Yes, you could have approximately, they say, to the visible eye, about 10,000
On the Milky Way.
Well, those are the stars you'll see. You may be seeing some beyond that. You may be seeing some. Sorry.
New ones always.
New ones coming up.
Yeah,
It could be, but really, if you go onto Google and you ask how many stars in the universe, you know what come out with? Exactly number. So they tell you because they think there's basically. I wrote it down here because it says that they estimate, and I'm sure they're probably well off, frankly. I wrote it down. 200 billion trillion stars. What it means two. Well, it's two to even at that twice that many, probably at least. 400 billion trillion. Well, look, a million. Sorry, everybody knows a million. Huh? A billion is 1,000 million. 1,000 billion. Yes, and that's a trillion. Right? So now you've got hundreds of billions, you've got hundreds of thousands of trillions. So do you understand? We're talking about a very lot. It's very hard to get your head around. So that's why we say it's a number. Somebody once said, I think they compared it. He said, like, that means there's 10 times. In other words, that number is 10 times as much as there are drops of water in all the Earth's oceans. If you had all the drop of all the oceans, how many drops? They can figure it out because they can figure out a cubic meter. Yes, a cubic meter has so much water in it, and you've got so many drops in a cubic meter, and they work out how many cubic meters in a cubic in a cubic a kilometer, and it works all out. You go back, you figure it all out, you know. So anyway, it's a lot of stars. Now the interesting thing is, Hashem is giving them all names. All names. Now, you know how many names science has given to stars? I actually looked this up as well. I want to find out what's going on. Do you know how many? And not a lot. The names, the real names of stars, like as opposed to numbers, because they do number galaxies, they sometimes number stars, 800. That sounds a lot. If you write down a list of 800, what? No, every specific star has a name. Yes, yeah.
For example.
For example,
Do they?
you want to look it up on?
Oh,
There are names. I mean, well, I can't. If you look up on list of stars, it gives you. There's Pelosia. There's lots of Latin names. Pelosia, Celesta. There are names. They're real names. Okay.
Hashem named the stars as well.
What?
First, Hashem
Sorry?
named the stars.
Well, that's exactly what I'm just about to say. That's it precisely. Thank you. Yes, you obviously you give the share. That's what I'm saying. That only humans have given 800 stars names, right? And then of course you've got maybe more numbered by scientists. And Hashem is giving 200 billion trillion stars names. Because you might think, well, what's another star? What do you have to give them a name for? You know, have to give a name for a star? Yes, because everything in creation is unique. Everything in creation is unique, even if it's just a star. Even if the star is very large and it's doing a lot of stuff, a lot of warmth, a lot of heat. You know, I think, well, what difference does it make if I name the stars?
And also, lots of shocking stars come out to make 10 shock.
Yes, absolutely. So, you know, we are tempted to think that everybody, you know, people look alike, people do things that, you know, people, you see, you go to the zoo and you see monkeys, oh, they all look alike, right? Right? You know, you get different people, we all look alike. But no, there's no two blades of grass that are the same in the world. There are no two snowflakes, and everything is totally and utterly unique. Twins, absolutely, look very similar, but they're unique.
Yeah, no, but some women.
Whatever. So everything is unique, and and in a sense, this is so. This is Eilish Shemos Bnei Yisrael. When we are called names, we're given something special. We're given something powerful. The very fact that Hashem called us names gave us the self-esteem and sense to overcome things. The exile tried to dehumanize us. Every exile is a dehumanization, right? It's what did they do in Auschwitz? What did they do in the Holocaust? Right? They tattooed a number. Yes, right. You're not a name. You don't have a name. You're a number. If you are only a number, that is the ultimate degradation, because you do not count. You're just a number, right? You are part of our statistic, okay? And in a sense, this is what the Egyptians, any kind of slavery does. It's how many slaves are working on one pyramid or one store sitting, right? And names are crucial, therefore. These are the names. Every one of them had names, okay? And we all had names, and we should realize that each and every one of our names represents a specific divine force and energy that only we can achieve, you know, in this world. And our mission, God forbid to think that we are just another number. We're just another. And a lot of people do feel that. You think, well, what significance can I possibly have in this vast world with billions of people doing lots of awful things? but our name actually is it's a very crucial, important thing. Your name shows the unique value that you have, and that's how you can overcome the feeling of you. If you realize who you are, like you spoke so beautifully at Hanukkah, about Viktor Frankl, about the whole idea of purpose, meaning. Your purpose of meaning for life, in a sense, is based on the very fact you have an individual name, because that's, in a sense, who you are, that your uniqueness, not as Joe, Mike, Phil. You know what I mean?
And that's what even that Jews took on even before Fatima, right? Took on the thing.
Well, actually, funnily enough, it's interesting. It says there were three things that the Jews merited to be redeemed from Egypt.
Yes, the clothing.
Clothing, they kept
their
their clothing,
language.
their names,
Their
they
names
kept
were
their
fine.
Hebrew names. Yes, and was it language as well, possibly?
People's language.
Could be the language. They kept so it's not a small
Like
thing.
food, they kept the same.
But they all Streimler on Shabbos. That sort of thing. Yeah. So you see it in the book, textbooks. They were all wearing Streimler.
No, I
See
know
it in
that.
the
Yeah.
Tiferet Shlomo's textbooks. Yeah. Anyway, so that uniqueness, each one's name gives us the power to realize and recognize that we are unique and we have a special mission, even in the small confines of one's own personal existence. But how is any war fought? It's fought by lots of little battles and being won. You know what I'm saying? This is not win the battle in any vast battle, tank battle, massive infantry battle. It's just lots of little things going on in each one, right? By one little chap who did this, or another chap who did this. When you add the aggregate of everybody doing what they do, then you win the war, right? But in Russia, they just now fired the top general. They found another top general, because he's not winning. They fired him. They keep firing all the generals because nobody's winning. Oh, well, but let's not get into that. This is not a politics.
You're right.
What do you mean she's right? She may be right, but it's not the right place for us. I don't want to chat about. Oh, I'm just trying to mention it that a war is won by individuals succeeding. Yeah, individuals succeeding with their names. I'm saying the name. That is the crucial point. That's what I want to make.
You mean teamwork?
Teamwork is. Yes, of course, teamwork is very important, because if you don't have the teamwork, then you're right. You're all on the same team. But I'm assuming the people who are, let's say, fighting a war, they realize they're on the same. They're on the same side. You realize you're on the same side.
You still need to do.
Yeah. Generally, it's a good idea. Okay. So yes. Now we know that the Egyptians. This pharaoh, whoever he was a new pharaoh, an old pharaoh who had amnesia. He was getting a bit old in age. A bit like current US chap. He just forgets what happened. Did I really steal some confidential documents? Yeah. Did I really? Who is this guy Yosef? He sounds familiar, but I don't remember him really. So he was a little bit forgetful, and started enslaving Jewish people. Of course,
It was the same Yosef. But same pharaoh, but we had.
It's a machlokas.
Just had different rules and.
Yeah, there's a machlokas. One says that he was a new one, and the other says it was the old one. But he just, I don't know, he got up out of bed wrong. I don't know, he didn't sleep well or something. He had a bit of a indigestion and a change of heart. That's right. Something happened. Something went all funny, went pear-shaped. Anyway, so what they said, look, let's try and sort these Jews out. Let's enslave them, because otherwise they're going to multiply so much. They were already multiplying so much. So they wanted to stop them multiplying. You put slavery on them, then they won't be able to multiply. Of course, the exact opposite happened. The more they try to oppress them, right? Yeah. That's why we say 3 times that whatever the non-Jews try to do, Hashem frustrates their designs. So the more they oppressed them, the more numerous they became. Okay, and then they got really frustrated because his astronomers came to them and said, you've got to throw all the babies into the water. right? In fact, if you look there if you turn over to page 348, page 348, 349, verse 22, right? And Paro commanded all the people, Kol habin hayilud hayored tashlichu, kol abasta hayilud. Everybody should throw, all of you. Now, interesting.
It means also the
yes,
non-Jews.
absolutely. The commentaries say that this was a decree upon all of the Egyptians because they couldn't tell. You see, that was the whole point. Because yes, they couldn't differentiate. They saw this. They could somehow these soothsayers and occultists. They could somehow see something in the future about some redeemer, but they didn't know if he was Jewish or Egyptian. Because they couldn't. Because that was the whole point. Because Moshe was, I'm saying he eventually was brought up, in the right.
But
So
wasn't this before modern times? They didn't know yet that it was from the mother who was Jewish.
well, they didn't know. No, they didn't. Moshe wasn't even born yet when this decree.
No, that's right.
When this decree first happened, Moshe wasn't born. We see in the next part about the birth of Moshe. So, but the decree was that the astrologers, they saw something dodgy here. There's going to be somebody's going to be born, and he's going to say the Jewish people. So we need to throw. But they couldn't figure out if he's Jewish or let's say from the Hebrew tribe or from anyway. They didn't know. So they said, everybody, just throw all the boys. It was a decree against everybody, right? Not just the Hebrews. It was all the because it says Kol habin hayilud any son that is born. It doesn't say to
What, even the Egyptian ones?
If you look carefully at the original decree, when they told Shifra and Pua, right? They was talking about the Ivrians. They was talking about the Hebrews. When he told Shifra and Pua, they conflate these two decrees with one. The first one was Pharaoh telling Shifra and Pua, Miriam and Yochebed, who were the midwives, yes, that they should kill, suffocate, whatever, the boys when they were born, and leave the girls alive. Yeah, that was directed at the Jews. Yes, that was directed at the Jews. Okay, now that was a general decree against the Jews because they were multiplying, right? But then later in verse 22, as I'm saying now, the decree got a little bit more desperate, and he started to impose this upon everybody. Obviously, in a way, we look at it as though the main decree was a continuation for us, right? Continuation of the Jews, the decree against the Jews. But if you look, the Rashi says, Af Alehem Gozar, right? Af Alehem Gozar, he decreed, or even on the Gentile. Now, in a sense, it was all part of one larger decree, but it was, there's a beautiful. I think again, I don't know if he first said this, but somebody once said, that any society, in terms of anti-Semitism, they usually start with the Jews. They start with the Jews, but they end up against everybody. The Jews, exactly, classic, right? Jews are usually the first victims. And if people do not respond, then they become the victims as well. Okay, so here the Jews they were the first. Okay, and then extended to other people as well. Okay, now what's this about the fact that the boys should be killed, but the girls should be kept alive? Look at this. Holabasta chayun. Interesting. All the girls you should leave alive. Why all the girls leave alive? Because the Egyptians really, they wanted to get rid of the Jewish people in terms of a people. The idea of getting rid of the Jewish people they could achieve without killing them. They said that all you have to do is for the women, techayun, you should get them assimilated into your lifestyle. Once you get the girls assimilated into the Egyptian lifestyle, then you don't have to worry about it. You can use the women, and they won't be able to propagate anyway because there's no Jewish men. Yeah. And so we'll have our cake and eat it. We'll have no problems either way.
They weren't especially in terms of the controversy anymore.
Well, no, the decree did that decree about throwing the boys into the Nile did end. Yes, after Yocheved put Moshe into the bassinet in the Nile, because then the astrologers saw, right, that they'd seen that he'd got thrown into water and he'd met his end. So the decree was then nullified. Yes, you don't have to throw the boys in anymore. We're sorted. The Redeemer is gone. Yes, that was why it stopped. But there's also another deeper idea: throwing into the Nile, throwing boys into the Nile, throwing kids into the Nile. There's an interesting concept here. The Nile represents something. No, not secularly. Well, I qualify that. What is it? It symbolized something in the old days. It was more than symbolized. Yes, exactly. It was more than a symbolism. They worshipped. Well, you see, in most countries, where do you get your water from? It comes from above. Right? So you have to look up, and we say, well, Hashem send the rain, right? They don't do that in Los Angeles nowadays for some reason, but anyway, it's pouring. It's right, whatever it is. Exactly.
They still idolize the river in India.
Yes. In India they what?
But the Ganges River is
But hold on. Not talking about the Ganges. I'm talking about rain. I'm talking about rain. Rain, like I said, I'm sure in the Middle East, it comes from Shemayim. So there is an awareness of heaven. The Nile was the real source of the irrigation in India. So therefore, you don't need rain. That's why they deified. Yes, the Nile. Yeah. So that's why they say that the Egyptians were in denial of Hashem. You know what I mean? So, and that is because it was there all the time. You don't need anything. You don't to pray.
You also see later on with the Maccas that also they wanted to deny Hakadosh Baruch Hu. They didn't want to accept Hakadosh Baruch Hu.
Of course. Well, Pharaoh did, or he did. Right. He lost his free choice on that. Right, yeah. Well, we'll be talking about that. Yes, in the next couple of weeks. But so, what does that represent nowadays? You see, there is a certain. You see, the Nile, because the Nile represented the wealth of Parnassus, the livelihood, if you like, because that's how everything grew and everything lived. Because if you don't have water, you don't have crops. If you don't have crops, you don't have food. If you don't have food, you don't have an economy. You have nothing. So if you have water, you have food, you have an economy, right? So water, in a sense, represents the basis of your Parnassus, of your livelihood. So that Nile represented that, and that's why they worshipped. So nowadays, I've come to what you were saying before, that nowadays there is a symbolic issue here, and we have that it represents sometimes the obsession of secular society in the idea of a parnasa. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? What's your job? What's going to be a tachlis? Well, and sadly, some people throw their children into this Nile of the parnasa, when they're very young, and everybody's worrying about exactly, is he going to be a doctor, a lawyer, an accountant? What's the profession going to be? And you have these kids who are very, very young. They're preparing them already from the age 6 and 7 for Oxford and Cambridge, because that's going to mean they're going to have this amazing parnasa, right? Whereas Jewish education, we believe Jewish education is the key, to becoming a decent person, a good person, a whole person. Okay. And the parnasa, Hashem, don't worry, Hashem looks after. He feeds 8 billion people. He'll feed another, he'll feed another people that come into this world. So this is the temptation of modern society, sometimes throwing our kids, into the I'm a present company, of course, excluded, but society at large. Because Jewish nowadays, Baruch Hashem, sending children out to Jewish day schools has become a very sort of normal, regular thing to do. But it wasn't like that 30, 40 years ago. Sending to Jewish, the only Jewish day schools around were like Hasmonean or JFS. I mean, there are a handful. And nowadays, you have like a fantastic choice of lots of different schools. Anyway, so this is the challenge even of our days. Now, if we move on to the birth of Moshe, we see that Moshe's, when he was born, it's actually on this verse, what does it say? If you look at verse 2 on this page, 348, 349, we see that Moshe was born. It says the whole house was full of light. But but too, what do we keep out? She sees is good. I mean, every baby was born. We had a grandchild born in Australia a few days ago. Thank you. Yeah, Menachem.
Mazel tov.
Menachem in Melbourne had a baby, and it's like, so to say, I mean, is anybody say a baby's born and say, oh, that's not good? I mean, I never heard anybody say that baby's not a good baby. You know what I mean? Every baby is a cutie wootie, right? So what is it? The babies were, she saw that. She saw that this baby is a good baby. No. It means something more. And therefore the Torah says, it says the whole house was full of light. So light. And see, normally when a child is born, we don't know what's going to be with the child. Going to turn out a book, tzaddik or not tzaddik. Yeah, we don't know. Famous Moshe in the Midrash. Mentioned it before. Famous Moshe. The chap goes to the port and he sees there's a ship going off. And the whole crowd cheering. The ship is going and everybody's cheering. Whoa, throwing hats in the air, streaming. The ship is going off on the voyage. To the side, there's this old, banged out ship coming back. There's sort of an exhausted captain there, and the ship is smothering. There's 3 people on the pier to welcome the ship. And the chap who sees this, he says, what a silly society we are. He says, this ship going off, it's all nice and smart. Nobody knows where it's going to come back or not in safety. And we're going to, could be a Titanic, absolutely. And yet everybody's cheering, oh, wonderful, amazing. What are they all cheering for? They should be the other side. The other guy's finally made it back. He's been away for years. Yes, the ship's a bit banged out, clapped out, but they made it back. They should be all cheering the other side. And then there's 3 people cheering, a little round of applause. So when kids are born, we always hope for the best. You gather the Torah, this one is going to be a God, he's going to be a wonderful, he's going to be a Torah scholar, he's going to be this, yes, we all hope that. But we don't know, right? And but when Moshe, this was not a subject of like, oh, will he, won't he? Is he, isn't he? Is it? This was the great Moshe Rabbeinu. His birth already signified great, immense, godly light. That was Kitoi, amazing. And Moshe had this very interesting experience, didn't he? Because he was sort of, I don't want to say part Egyptian, part Jewish. He was Jewish. I mean, Hebrew. He was one of the Hebrews. Of course, he was born from a Jewish mother, Cheved. In fact, she nursed him for the first few years, right? You know the story. She managed to nurse him. An amazing thing. You can imagine the tragedy of having to give this little kid baby up. Give him up, this beautiful baby that had such light, never already could see the light, and to plonk him on the water. Goodbye after 3 months, right? And then the incredible relief and joy at being able to be reunited with the baby and to, with the blessing of the Pharaoh's daughter, to look after him for a few years.
I wonder if he looked like his mother, like he, like he looked like his mother, and he was,
I don't know.
They also said something very interesting. But that was beautiful. The Talmud says here on page 349 that he was already born breast.
Yes. He was born. Yes, he was born circumcised. Correct, and that also showed his greatness. Okay, so this is true. Now, so part of him. It's interesting. He was a Hebrew, so he wasn't in the slavery. He wasn't part of that slavery. And yet he was part of Egypt, and he was in the Egyptian, grew up as an Egyptian. He grew up in Egyptian court. So it was like one foot there and the other foot out, to the point where he empathized so much with his brothers, he went out to see them. Yes. So it was this idea of being there and not being there and being outside. We mentioned it last week. The idea that a prisoner cannot, I think it was last week. Oh, it was a few weeks ago. No, it was about being buried. Remember when we spoke about Yaakov not wanting to be buried in Israel, in his time. He wanted to be buried in Israel. And we spoke about the importance of that a prisoner cannot release themselves from prison. Yes, they have to take themselves out. Somebody else has to take them out. So, right? If you can't be the prisoner, Moshe was never enslaved. So that he was the one person who could take the Jews out. He was the one Jew who actually wasn't enslaved, because the others were they were buried. They were buried. So you can't. So that was the idea. So this idea of being inside and outside at the same time was actually also a function of, and happened to his own mother, Yocheved. Because what does it say about Yocheved? Where was she born? Between the walls. What does that mean, between the walls? As they came to Mitzrayim, and they came to the main city, town, whatever it was, there's a wall. There's usually a wall around. Yes? And apparently she was born at that time as they were literally coming into. So she was like, because if you add up the number of people who came to Egypt, it was actually only 69. Only 69. But let's see, who was the 70th? The 70th was Yocheved. She was born as they came into Israel. As they came into Egypt, she was born. But where was she conceived? She was conceived in the land of Israel. She was conceived outside. But she was born, so to speak, in the walls.
Same thing you say about you.
Yeah, but Yosef was not alive. He was dead.
No, but when he was alive, he
Yeah.
was like kind of in the inside, but
Well, that's right, and that's why they had such a great time when he was alive, because they were immune. They were immune. The Jews were immune to the machinations of the Egyptians, because he was the one. They all belonged to him. Remember, they sold him as slave, and therefore they all belonged to Yaakov in a way. In a way, he was their son. After they died, all the brothers died. The Egyptians, the amnesiac, the ones who forgot it, they forgot who they were, and they forgot who their benefactors were, which Joseph saved their whole life. Yeah, they lied to the Egyptians.
kind of a similar kind of.
It's a similar idea. It's a similar idea, but of course Joseph was no longer alive, and therefore he couldn't actually redeem them. In fact, he said, before he died, he said, when you are redeemed, take me with you. Take me with you. Because he wanted to be there with them. You remember we spoke about that, the empathy of being with them. But here, so in a sense, Yocheved had the same idea, that she was sort of with. She was actually part of the crown of the family as they're in Egypt, and yet she was outside. He came from outside, and therefore Moshe himself, that double thing where you're able to be in and be out and be able to rescue the Jewish people, so to speak, in that way, came in a sense from Yocheved. Yeah. Sorry.
How long was Yocheved in hospital?
In what?
Parsha.
What do you
How
mean?
long was she able to stay with?
Oh yeah, until he was until he no longer needed to be nursed.
How long?
2 or 3.
He didn't live well. He did.
She's not with the Remember, the kid, but basically, children of those days were much more matured much earlier than nowadays.
Mummy.
Well, of course. Well, it certainly said mummy. He was, believe me, a guy like that must have been very, very mature and was probably, already talking a lot younger. And so his mother, gave him a good chinuch and told him, remember who you are, man. Who's the Yid, Yiddish boy chick, and she prepared, because she knew she's going to have to give him back. That was the deal. But
Overlander, even nowadays,
I don't know why
one of
she
my
couldn't-
daughters was feeding a baby,
Yeah.
and somebody was critical and said to her, that age, and she said he's entitled. After that, whenever he wants to feed,
He never tapped her. He went, I'm entitled.
Ah!
I promise you. So already at that age,
Oh, that's funny.
that's for this day and age.
They hear everything. Very good.
Yeah.
I'm entitled.
Entitled.
That's very funny. That's very funny. Yeah. Okay. So then we read about the fact that, of course, if we go over the page a little bit, that we see that he grew. Yigdal Yeled, it says in verse 10, Yigdal Yeled, so Bataviyu Leves Levaspara. And that's what it says, that he grew. So obviously at one it doesn't say exactly how. I think you look at the Midrash, probably will tell you exactly how old he was.
Yeah, but how was his whole?
Or Me'am
Hannah-
Loez. Look at Me'am Loez. It's also her anthology.
How was his whole provided after his mother left?
You mean where did he learn brachas and Vayikra and the Mishnah and the Mishnayos? You know, this was his chinuch. At that point, what was chinuch? What was chinuch? At the end of the day, chinuch in those days, the education was to realize that they were from a nation of, the tribe of Bnei Yisrael. They were the children of the children of. They were all grandchildren. They had a patriarch, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Yes, and they knew they were destined to be in slavery. Yes, they knew, and presumably they knew that they were going to come out of that slavery and go back to Israel, and they knew they were probably understood their destiny, to get the Torah. So the main idea of chinuch in those days was an identity, an identification with, an identity with, that history and destiny. I think that's fair to say that the chinuch was, and that you don't need. I mean, she drilled that into him. Sure. First of all, he probably knew it intuitively. He was such a great soul. The fact that he was filled with life. The Rebbe tells a story. When you talk about great something, I hear the Rebbe tells a story. There's a picture of the Rebbe when he was 3 years old, with long hair, before his option, or on his option. Could be it was on his option, and it's just a fascinating picture. You see a 3-year-old, and you see his eyes. Very, very thoughtful picture. And the Rebbe writes in his own personal journal, or he writes in a letter to someone. I can't remember exactly where he writes it. He said from a very young age, it already started to crystallize in my mind thought and the idea of the final redemption, which would make all the suffering of the exile that we had gone through, would somehow bring it meaning. This is what he wrote about himself. Okay, it doesn't say exactly how old he was, but he said from a very young age. You see, so there are certain great neshamas that just get it. They see things. They see things mitzad emes. They get it. They know it. They get it. Okay, and most of us, 99.999% of us, it's about being chinuch. And I'm sure Yocheved, the great mother that she was, she did what she needed to inculcate that. You may be going to live in a life of luxury with the Egyptians, but you have to know who you are, and someday it's gonna be a special thing. We're gonna have amazing redemption.
When does he reunite with his mother? Because he go from from where he's at to going to Mitzri,
Well, here,
and
if you
having conversation with Hashem.
well, if you look, no, wait a minute. No. When does he reunite with his
mother after?
Oh, well, we don't know.
No, I mean, when does he see her again? Like, if there's no indicator in her.
Are you talking about after he grew up into and went to Egypt?
history book.
Went into the.
Yeah, I know it's not. You're right.
Are you talking about?
It's just something that's like more
Well,
of
she
the
comes
heart
out
of.
with them. She doesn't come out.
We
Do
don't
we know?
read about. We
Yeah,
don't read
yeah.
about her, whether she came out or not. She probably didn't. And the reason I say that is because remember, he was born. This whole thing. He was born, right? Now we're reading. How old was she at that time? She was 130 when she had, or 131, which itself was a pretty She was an old lady, but that's miraculous. She became young again, right? That's also another aspect of her double, So she became young again. She had a baby. When were the Jews redeemed from Moshe? 80 years later. He was 80 years old at the redemption. That would have made it 200 and over
and
200 years.
They were degenerating and something. They were like not
Well,
living
the
as long.
age, exactly. So I think it's fair to say that she had already passed away well before the Geula. I think that's fair to say. I haven't. It seems obvious.
Were the years though exactly the same as now? Probably not.
Why not?
Yeah,
Why would you
Yes.
say not?
I don't know.
I know a lot of people talk about this with regard to creation.
Creation.
I've never heard anybody say that with regard to, let's say, later historical events. But I think that's a bit of a problem, generally, to speak like that, because to suggest about the days, because you see, the Torah is there to teach us something. Now, if it's teaching us in something that is enigmatic and it doesn't mean what it says, so then we usually have a tradition. There's a tradition that even though it says, let's say, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, yes?
Right.
We have a tradition that it doesn't mean literally. And that tradition, nobody argues with. It's not like somebody says, oh, no, it does mean literal. There's not one rabbi who says, yes, you go and poke the other guy's eye, chop his hand off, right? We leave that to other religions, yes? We don't do that sort of thing, yeah? Because they take it literally, yeah? But because so in other words, the oral tradition in a sense is more powerful in a way than even what is written. It's written. But you're not chopping his hand off. You're not poking his eye out. No, because that's not what we understand it to mean. But days, weeks, and months, right? There's no tradition anywhere that says the day in Bereshis is not 24 hours. By Erev Vayevoka, there's only one day. So I mean, a million years, a billion years, 100 million years, because then you got a slight problem. You know what the real problem is with that? It's a little thing called Shabbos. Right? Why are we resting on Shabbos? Because for the 6 days of creation. Now, if it doesn't mean a day, then what are we resting for a day for? The Torah tells us we're supposed to rest for Shabbos, which is a day. Right? So that's one point. And then when you say, well, when? And then you could ask a question, well, when would the days become our days? At what point would an hour and a day and a month? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And finally, I would just say that even at creation, it says that the sun and the moon were created in order to help us, not just the seasons, but also the days and the weeks and the months and the years. That's what it says in Bereshis. Yeah. So if it doesn't mean a day, then it doesn't mean an hour. There are people who do say this, but I'm saying there's a letter from the Rebbe about this, especially about Shabbos. Shabbos is a very big thing because how could you Shabbos? If Shabbos is 1,000 years, a day is 1,000 years. It says in Tehillim, the day for Hashem is 1,000 years.
Well, I think the whole thing is what they find in the earth is a million years and 1,000 years.
Yeah.
So, and then how did it get there? I mean, how did it be a
Because
million?
God made it like that.
That's one theory. It's when he planted in there.
I understand.
That's
Because
fair.
that the problem is we Jews sometimes feel the need to quote unquote apologize for scientific opinion and to try and resolve the Torah with scientific opinion. The problem is, of course, that scientific opinion keeps changing every Monday and Thursday. And what we once thought this, and now we know. Well, now you got a bit of a now you're in up the creek a bit because now you're going to have to reinterpret Torah for the new stuff. It's not about theories, okay? So it's the fact that the world looks very old. That's a different story. There are a couple of answers to that as well. Why the world looks so old, yeah. But we don't, maybe we don't want to get quite into that now because otherwise, oh my goodness, I've just noticed that the time seems to run out here. We're after 12 o'clock here, and yes, that's quite amazing. I'll just mention one more thing here. This idea of him growing. Let me just share with you a beautiful thought I heard yesterday. Vayigdal Moshe on verse Yudalef. Vayigdal Moshe Yetzel Echad. Right. So Rashi points out that it already says he grew. So now, why is he saying he grew again? Okay, so Rashi says that what does Rashi say? In the name of Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Goy, Rishon Lakomo Hashem L'Gedur. The first one meant physically, he grew physically. The second one meant he grew in greatness. Yes, this is what Rashi says. And it's here. You just take my word for it. Okay, we're looking at verse 11 here on page 350. Yeah, 51 and 353 and 51. Now, here's the beautiful word. I love it. Vayikda Moshe. What made him really great? Vayetzelach. Because he went out to see how his brethren were doing, and he looked to see how they were doing. That's what makes a person great. When you go out of your own box and you go look to see if somebody else needs help and to see if you can help other people resolve their problems and challenges and issues, just like Yosef did when he was in the pits. He was literally in the pits, okay? And yet he tried to help those Egyptians out with their dreams. Moshe Rabbeinu, the same thing. How did he become great? He went out to look at his brothers to see. It really bothered him because he knew where he came from, and it bothered him to see that these people were like slaves. Imagine, it really bothered him. He couldn't do anything about it. What's he going to do? Say, stop! No more slavery! Yeah, right. Thanks very much. You know what I mean? That's right. So, but at least he went to try and help, and that's what made him great. By Yigda, that's what makes a person great. Caring about somebody else's suffering. I think it's a very beautiful view. So we have run out of time, I'm afraid, and there's so much to talk about, but what can you do? This is part of the joy of Torah study. So, Mitzvah Shem, any questions, comments? If not, I will just mention, so Mitzvah Shem, hopefully